a flying vehicle without wheels and being pulled by horses. They had no other words for this. Now, as the late Michael Heiser used to point out, he would be on the other side of this argument. He would argue that in fact they were describing what they saw, but I think clearly they were not. And Heiser would say that, well, they did have words for shiny and metal and so forth. Yeah, but shiny and metal's one thing, but if you've got this object that's flying, you have to describe it in a way that conveys a vehicle of conveyance. Not just shiny. There was a shiny thing floating or something. No. In their minds, there had to be some sort of animals pulling this thing through the sky. Mm-hmm. Because that's the only conceptualization they could have possibly had.
Right. Because they make sense of it in their own minds.
These were Iron Age people.
Right, yeah.
And so how can a craft move? How can a vehicle move through the sky, let alone on the ground, without some sort of beast of burden pulling it? It's impossible to the ancient mind. That can't happen. That's impossible. So they're describing these vehicles, and Elijah isn't the only example. They're describing these chariots of Israel in the best way they know how. Chariots of fire. And so I don't think that there's any reason whatsoever for modern rational thinkers to look back at that story or any of these examples in the Old Testament and conclude that angels were flying around the sky in chariots with horses, just like Santa Claus with a sleigh and reindeer. It's the same logic.
Right, yeah.
And I reject both of those propositions equally. There is no sleigh flying through the sky being pulled by reindeer, and there are no chariots flying through the sky being pulled by horses.
Yep.
So they chose a word that described a vehicle, the chariot, instead of saying something that was shiny and could fly. They said, this is a vehicle. Yeah.
Because shiny metal things don't fly. In the mind of an Iron Age thinker, shiny metal things don't fly. They have no conceptualization for an aircraft.
Yeah.
The only thing that they can understand is a vehicle being pulled by beasts of burdens. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
Or maybe a ship on the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But boats are on the water. This thing came down and landed. And so we are entitled, based on the narrative of the Old Testament and the narrative of the Bible taken as a whole, Old and New Testament, we are entitled as rational thinkers, believers, we are entitled to conceptualize these vehicles in modern terms. We are not somehow forced to think like Iron Age people. We don't have to think like Iron Age people. We don't have to. It doesn't make you a more accurate. It doesn't make it. It doesn't help. There's no advantage in thinking like an Iron Age person when reading the scriptures, unless you're trying to understand the cultural context in which things are occurring. And that is very useful. That is very advantageous. But when we look at technology, we understand today we have craft that flies without anything pulling it whatsoever. Airplanes. Right? So we can understand how a helicopter can land and somebody can get in it and take off. That makes sense to us. So that's I think that's part of deconstructing what I would call a Sunday school perspective or a Sunday school perception of the biblical narrative, and start to maybe allow ourselves to think in modern terms for some of the things that we're encountering.
Yeah. How did you get to where you had to